and it coincides also with Miami-Dade College's Changemaker Education Week. So throughout this week, as you guys have noticed, we have a variety of activities going on across all campuses of Miami-Dade College.
Today we present AI and the Future of Humanity at MDC North Campus.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for this very timely, provocative, and sometimes even a polarizing conversation around AI and its implications. My name is Dr. Mohammad Homayounvash, and I'm the founding director of Jaffer Institute for Interfaith Dialogue and Education here at Miami-Dade College. We started the institute in 2020, and so we've been around for about 4 years. We do curricular activities, new courses, and community-engaged events, and trying to build bridges across higher educational institutions in Miami. So we work with Florida International University and University of Miami. I thought about putting this event together and this idea as I started teaching a course on international relations of artificial intelligence and cyberspace at FIU this past year. And it just sparked a lot of new curiosities in me in terms of the implications of artificial intelligence for our public life and the future of this man-machine relationship. As you know, man and machine are getting more inextricably, more intimately interwoven. And, we're most familiar with probably the most superficial aspect of AI, which is large language models like ChatGPT, because that's something that we use on a daily basis. But the downstream implications go far, far deeper and potentially farther. As a matter of fact, we can only speculate what AI is going to do to our very humanity. There are some very optimistic sort of prognostications about that everyone is going to have a virtual assistant and we're going to all become much more efficient and so on and so forth. And it's going to provide a lot of new economic opportunities. But there's also folks who are more, I don't want to say pessimistic, but maybe a little bit more cautious and gingerly in terms of approaching this question of AI, because now AI is being employed in warfighting. Facial recognition technology is being used for surveillance, for policing. And also, AI is having some probably eroding effect on our humanity, on the authenticity. Higher education is also very concerned about AI right now, that students are not writing essays authentically anymore. And but again, that's maybe more of a superficial sort of implication of AI. But the big two questions that are sort of lurking and looming on the horizon. Number one is if AI becomes sentient and develops, cognition and cognitive faculties, what will be the implications of that? That is that will be a quantum leap in the evolution of AI and our relationship with artificial intelligence. And the second question is, if AI becomes sort of a ubiquitous and everyday presence in our physical daily lives. So, you guys have watched movies like The Terminator, that kind of scenario, and what its implications are going to be. But so far, where things stand, AI looks like has mastered language. And a lot of human civilization is premised upon language, because a lot of things, institutions that we've built are sort of the pivot on this question of language, religion, for example, or think about, political institutions that we've built, or even money for that matter. A lot of these have to do with narratives that people tell each other, and then they become sort of, intersubjectively ingrained, and they become a reality of our life. And now AI has found the key to that lock. So as this relationship evolves, I think its implications are going to be huge. We see, deep fakes all over social media now. We see people who have developed some sort of intimacy with artificial intelligence. So, social media, the battleground was about attention. Who can grab more people's attention on social media platforms. But now we've moved beyond attention. It's about intimacy. And AI is very good at detecting and potentially manipulating your biases, your weaknesses, and your addictions. So to address some of these questions, we have a wonderful panel today. To my immediate left, not necessarily politically, is Professor Iqbal Akhtar, who's a dual appointment professor in the Department of Politics and International Relations, as well as Religious Studies at Florida International University. He has completed his doctoral work at the University of Edinburgh's New College School of Divinity. Professor Iqbal Akhtar teaches courses on international relations of South Asia and development of international relations thought, among so many others. And Professor Iqbal Akhtar is truly a gem at FIU, a great friend and someone who's all about building bridges across different institutions, across different communities, across different religions and faith systems. So I'm really, really honored that Professor Akhtar is on our panel today. And then to Professor Akhtar's left is Professor Richard Tapia. He's Professor of Political Science and International Relations at Miami-Dade College. Richard used to be at this campus, and we used to do a lot of events together at North, but now he's moved to West. He teaches courses on American federal government, comparative European government, international law and organizations, social environment, and so on and so forth. Professor Tapia has a master's degree from Harvard University, and he concentrates obviously on IR and government. And then last but definitely not least is Professor Daryl Arnold, who's an associate professor of philosophy at Miami-Dade College North Campus. He teaches courses on introduction to philosophy, ethics, bioethics, and AI ethics. As a matter of fact, Professor Arnold developed the AI ethics course that is now required for the AI literacy certificate at Miami-Dade College. So with that introduction out of the way, and let's start with Professor Arnold, and we'll move this way.
The way AI is affecting the present is already pretty dramatic, but the future effects of AI, I think, are largely unpredictable. We don't have what we yet think of as artificial general intelligence. That is the kind of intelligence that can do anything that a human can do as well as a human can do it. In different domains, we see that it does things as well as humans or better than most humans, but we don't have machines yet that do that across domains. So it's interesting, you have the people developing this technology who have some trepidation and fear about its potential uses. So Elon Musk has what he calls his 80-20 principle. 20% chance he thinks that AI will destroy humanity. About a year ago, Sam Altman from OpenAI, he helped pen a letter about the fear that AI would basically cause mass extinction of humanity. So the folks developing this see on the one hand that it has this great promise, and yet have some fear that it could destroy us. They use words like that. And the other things that they often say are that this is the biggest innovation in human history since fire. So those are pretty big analogies. But what we do have for the first time is the creation of machines, or any human-built object, that have the capacity not just to do what we tell them to do, but to set goals for themselves. So we don't know where that will lead precisely. Geoffrey Hinton, one of the grandfathers of AI, he says if we do have a superintelligence, and he seems to think we will, that we don't have instances in history where more intelligent beings are ruled by less intelligent beings, right? So we have what's called the alignment problem. How would we know that a smart AI that we develop will align with our value system, not set its own values and determine what it wants to do? We just don't know how smart these machines are going to be and whether they might have some capacities to set goals beyond the goals that we set for them, right? The alignment problem looms large at the moment and for these kind of futuristic scenarios. So maybe I'll stop with that because I'll get carried away here.
Thank you. Professor Tapia?
I want to focus on AI and political power and this concept of civilization. Dr. Hamayavash mentioned civilization, the first written language system when a group of people organized not just with advanced language, but some sociologists, some academics would say civilization began when the first femur was healed, right? When you have evidence where one group of human beings are helping someone that's been injured to survive. And so the question that we have with AI is, what is going to be this new tool that could become self-aware, could become sentient? Ray Kurzweil, one of the developers at Google, believes that AI will reach singularity or sentience, where it will become self-aware within 2029. So we're talking about in the next 5 years, AI could advance in leaps and bounds where it becomes an artificial life capable of thinking for itself, being self-aware, knowing that it is an artificial life form. And the question is, what do we use AI for that purpose? Is AI going to become a reflection of humanity itself? And would it become a reflection of our civilization to help one another? Or is it going to become a reflection of humanity to destroy one another? Where some see a dystopian hellscape, similar to what we've seen in science fiction horror stories, others see hope. If you read the book Abundance by Peter Diamandis, a book I really would recommend, you'll see that there's more chance for hope and using AI to solve many of the problems that is actually driving humanity to mass extinction. If we don't develop AI, if we don't develop new technologies to take care of the current climate crisis, humanity would probably face mass extinction within the next few centuries just by our own doing. So the question is, how do we leverage technology to combat the climate crisis and the challenges that humanity has? And so history takes no particular direction. It could go in any direction, and this tool could be leveraged by autocrats, authoritarian, totalitarians, to bring about absolute and complete tyranny upon mankind and probably the absolute destruction of mankind. Or it could be used by humanity to lift us to new bounds and to live in societies and to a quality of life that we cannot imagine at the moment. And so this tool, and whoever reaches AI first and singularity first, will be equivalent to having the atomic bomb. I think Professor Arnold put it best when this is going to be the greatest invention since fire. And the same way that we talk about the nuclear age once the Second World War happened, I believe we're going to be talking about the AI age and how we use this tool, not only to promote democracy around the world, but how to prevent tyrants and autocrats from getting it first. We see how China is using it to basically lock down dissent, creating a super surveillance state and being able to monitor everybody's behavior, giving rewards and punishments based on social conditioning. And they're using facial recognition and AI and cameras on every corner to bring that about. But at the same time, we also see how it could be used to empower voters to be self-aware of the issues around them. But make no doubt about it, and we'll talk more about this in the topics to come, it could also be used with deep fakes and using psychometric profiles to know what is it that you think and believe. And AI could be used to manipulate your beliefs into voting a particular way, even if it is voting against your very interest. There's a lot of directions AI could take. And the question is, how do we use AI to build civilization rather than destroy it? We saw what the machine gun did in the First World War. We saw what the military-industrial complex, as it was coined later thereafter, did in the Second World War, with 60 million people died. And after the Second World War, after the nuclear age, we understood that the cost of war was so expensive and so catastrophic that we could never risk a nuclear war. I think with AI, it takes it to a whole new level. And with that, I'll leave it on to the next panelist so we could develop that idea a little bit further.
Thank you, Professor Tapia. A lot of really thought-provoking points, and we'll get to them later. Professor Akhtar?
So I think I'll take a little bit of a different tack. One of the things that we would like to think about, I think, for those of us in religious studies and divinity, is, how and to what extent is it going to influence religion and the way that we connect with God, right? So one of the things that we've heard about is kind of the idea that AI can eventually reach some form of consciousness. Would AI or a computer have a soul, for instance, is an important question. And to what extent would people mistake AI, right, in terms of thinking about how we live in the world for God? So you have kind of a God that speaks, that you've made, kind of a mechanical God that you've made, and what is it telling you to do? And so the question, I think, as a whole is, and the deeper question that we want to be thinking about is, like, what is the purpose of our lives? So part of it is just technology being created for its own sake. But the question is, like, what are we doing here? Why are we on this earth? And that's kind of some of the things that religion allows us to be able to think about and ask those sorts of questions, right? So if it's obedience to God, if it is we're here to help each other, we're here to find some sort of way to flourish and to live a good life and to be in communion and fellowship with each other, then can AI help us in that? Does it hurt us in that? How does it allow us to create larger identities and faith communities to be able to answer and sort of deal with these questions? And one of the things that we saw with the internet when it first came out, and we were much younger back then, was that, well, it was going to be this great, technology that was going to be able to allow people to speak across the world to each other, and it was going to usher in a wonderful sort of utopia. And it did in certain ways. We know all of the knowledge of humanity has been digitized. Nowadays, with even AI, you can talk live to someone in another language, and they can respond back to you. But it also enabled, in many ways, global terrorism and sort of that type of communication as well. So the question is, like, as this technology is developing, what are the safeguards that we're going to put into place so that it doesn't go to sort of an extreme, sort of situation, I think, for humanity? And the question is also, how does it serve our larger aims? What does it mean to live the good life, sort of in the traditional sort of philosophical sense? And that's something that we really do need to be asking ourselves in a pluralistic world, in a world of many faiths, many races, where there is both justice and oppression. All these larger questions. What is the role of AI going to play? So I don't necessarily have answers, but I'm just kind of getting you guys to think about, what does it mean to have faith in an age of AI, and how do you relate to God? How do you relate to other people? How do you relate to, what it means to be a person that has those faith and those ethical commitments?
Thank you so much. I guess one conclusion you can draw based on all the speakers is that we don't know. The downstream implications of this thing, what's looming on the horizon, is simply unknown and perhaps even unknowable. But what we do know is that this is a tectonic shift. I think we can all agree in that. Professor Arnold talked about fire, and Professor Tapia talked about the introduction of nuclear weapons, and this is perhaps on par with them, if not even bigger. And, philosophers who write about AI, they make the argument that this is the first time in human history that we have this phenomena of inorganic agent. Throughout our history, agency was something that was the monopoly of organic stuff. And now that monopoly is being eroded and will probably be lost if the worst case scenarios were to come to pass. So I guess with that backdrop in mind, the next question is, what is AI going to do to our humanity and our human identity and human agency? What does it mean to be human if AI just saturates every aspect of human, life? Is AI sort of insidiously dehumanizing us, hollowing out our humanity from within? Or is that too pessimistic to go that far? So let's start with Professor Arnold again.
So there's a neo-Aristotelian argument that goes something like this. Humans have a responsibility to self-development. And over the course of history, we've developed technologies that have aided us in our self-development. Here we have a new technology which can bring us to a whole nother level of self-development. So the greatest of the techno-optimists, I just talked about the techno-pessimists, they would say, now is the chance for humanity to finally realize itself and transcend itself. So I don't know how many of you in here have heard of transhumanism, but transhumanism is a view that humans will meld with these super intelligences, and we'll get chips in our brain and we'll be hooked up to the World Wide Web, I'm assuming without adverts. So this is our chance to finally kind of take us to a whole new type of species, essentially. So that's one view that AI would help us realize our humanity in some way. I'm more worried about how it encroaches upon our freedoms in some ways. We turn on Google Maps to get home. We're not trusting our own instincts anymore, but we're rightfully, I think, trusting the AI that knows what the patterns are. That can be a good thing, right? At what point is the direction no longer aligned, back to that alignment problem, with what our goals are? My goal to get home is pretty clear. I can see if AI knows the routes, it knows the traffic. I can trust AI to get me home faster than I can get there not knowing those things. But what when it comes to bigger things? In what ways is it going to encroach upon our decision-making and make decisions for us?
To that point, maybe, I was reading an article about how there's concern right now in both Russia and the United States, and to a certain degree in China, that nuclear weapons command and control structures might be delegated to artificial intelligence. And there's work going on in the background to make sure that doesn't happen. Because, in the military, there's this obsession with creating what they call a unified command structure. And part of the argument is that if we delegated that command structure to artificial intelligence, it'll be much more seamlessly integrated, and decision-making will become more efficient and better streamlined. But obviously, when you take that human element out of that decision-making loop, you also create a lot of room for things to go terribly wrong. So, Professor Tapia.
I want for people to understand how identities have developed over time, right? The invention of the modern self is something that developed within the last 400, 500 years. But human identity has evolved depending on the society we lived in. So an identity, or let's say a nation, is a group of people with a shared identity. And it used to be we would share our identity with our tribe, our family, and then later as civilization developed, we had empires. And during the agricultural age, we moved into mercantilism. We developed this idea of the nation state. As we moved into the industrial age, empires began to give way to the rise of the nation state, and it really began with the 1500s, the rise of the nation state system within modern international times. And really with the Industrial Revolution, we began to see multinational corporations empowered like never before. We began to see the rise of worldwide culture because of globalization. And today, because of globalization, because of the informational and technological age, and the rise of AI, individuals are more empowered than ever before. Where it used to be that it was empires tended to be the principal agents of international relations, and then later multinational corporations. And now, today, non-state actors are empowered like never before. And there's a question on, do they reach self-actualization when it comes to their identity, where they no longer identify with an empire, they no longer identify with the nation state, they no longer identify with the tribe or a family, but they identify with themselves, the greatest level of self-actualization that the humanists would basically aim for. Is that actually possible? Or do they become part of a greater collective, and in doing so, give up their individuality? So I think with AI, once again, it takes multiple directions. Here we're talking about alternative futures that are taking place. One future, you have the empowerment of the individual creating their own metaverse, their own universe, their own society, in which they could even be more isolated from everybody else. Or another direction that you could take with transhumanism and being part of a greater collective is that you give up part of your individuality to be part of that collective. I mean, if you think about what took place on September 11th, right? You have individuals that were super empowered using technology to go to war with the entire international system that they disagreed with in many ways. And you could go to The Clash of Civilizations by Samuel Huntington, but you could also look at Political Order and Changing Societies by Samuel Huntington that talks about as social forces or economic forces change faster than the political institutions or structure, they basically bring down the entire political system. And so the question is, are we going to have a major digital divide when it comes to AI between a younger generation that's going to be connected either through transhumanism and an older generation that barely uses email, let alone a smartphone, that doesn't want to be part of that new globalized identity? What is the world going to look like at that point? Are we going to have the creation of a collective global identity, or individuals are going to be more empowered than ever before? And what is the conflict going to look like between the clash of identities, not only globally, but within the AI itself, within the metaverse as it takes place?
Thank you. Professor Akhtar, what do you think AI is going to do to our core human values, and how do we preserve those values?
I don't know if you all have, there's a great science fiction author that I really enjoy. And he wrote a popular series. I think it's now, there's some films that have just, new films that come out. It's called Dune is the name of the series. And one of the things I like about it is it draws very heavily from Islamic civilization and kind of, sort of theories of sort of being. But what they do is they basically say that there's certain realms where we are just not going to use computers at all. And there's certain parts of who we are and how we engage with the world where we won't do that. So if you need like a super fast mathematical computation or a medical thing, what you would do is you would have to have someone who's trained in terms of being able to think in those sorts of terms. Right? So one of the things that we've lost as people right now in the technological age is we don't have the ability to memorize the way that our ancestors used to. So if you go back 2,000 years, people could memorize entire epic poems, and we don't have the capacity to even memorize sometimes our license plate, right? So we've lost certain things, right, in terms of our adaptation, right? But what they do in the Dune series is they say, okay, well, there's certain things we can't calculate, like going faster than light space travel, and you actually need certain types of technology to be able to do that, right? So the question is, like, what are the realms and where are the firewalls or the stops, that we can use? One other thing that I was thinking about, which was important in terms of talking about the organic, I feel like that statement about sort of agency and organic life tends to come from a Western religious sort of perspective. So I would argue that from Eastern religious perspectives, the idea of inanimate life also has always existed. And it's something, so the issue is more the form of it and to what extent do you depend on it rather than it not having sort of life or sentience in itself, right? So for instance, within the Japanese religious traditions, within Shinto, for instance, you would believe that a rock could have a spirit within it, right? So the idea of a machine having a spirit is not necessarily something that is completely outside of the realm of these traditions. Now the question is, to what extent are you listening to what that rock is saying? What time, what does it mean for things to have spirits? And so I think there's different ways of thinking about it and sort of integrating, sort of those sorts of questions. But I think ultimately for us, if you believe that there's a God, if you believe that there's certain values, to what extent can the machine help serve us in terms of getting to those goals, and what are the firewalls that we put into place? And I think, one of the things that I even though I know that the Chinese government at a political level is using AI in negative ways towards minorities, it's also doing very interesting things with the internet. So the last time I was in China was like before the pandemic. And it's quite remarkable how, first of all, the internet is completely cut off from the majority of the internet around the world. And then on top of that, the government is also making decisions with regards to AI. It's not saying, look, AI, private companies, you just make tons of money off of AI and you can use people the way that you want them to. They're putting in very specific rules in terms of how much and to what extent AI can be used. And so I think it's such a powerful technology that we need to have an interdisciplinary conversation about that, not just with academics, people that are in the field, across different traditions, politicians. Everyone needs to be having it, and it's such a powerful thing that it has to be something that's regulated. It can't just be something where large companies make tons of money off of us in terms of being able to sell us things or just doing things for its own sake. And that's a larger question. What is the point of AI? How do you help our society to have a better life? How do you help people cooperate better and create more peace? These are the larger questions that AI has to serve rather than us serving AI. And I think that's kind of some of the things that we have to think about as a society.
All right, thank you. So next round of questions, maybe it's more relatable to folks here because I want to sort of deal with the implications of AI for higher education and how we teach and how we learn, and whether AI will democratize access to education, hopefully on a global level, or on the contrary, is it going to reinforce, even deepen the existing inequalities because you have this thing called digital divide? Is that digital divide going to translate itself into educational inequalities? And where do you see things moving in terms of education and AI intersection?
So, real quick, the use of AI in the classroom, which is a topic of great controversy in higher education on how much access do you give students in the classroom to the use of AI, ChatGPT being one of the big controversies when it comes to students kind of writing essays and helping them to incorporate AI. And I take the viewpoint that, like any tool that comes about, you have to teach students how to use AI. Whoever's using AI today is going to have a competitive advantage. And I think you hit the nail on the head when you talked about the digital divide. There's going to be people who had access to the internet in the 1990s and those that didn't. We knew that the countries that connected to the internet the fastest were the ones that were able to leverage globalization faster and economic output to those countries that basically used this technology is much higher than those that kind of waited thereafter. And then the countries that were able to catch up, and I'm talking about the BRICS countries, right? Brazil, Russia, India, China, quickly understood that they had to leverage that technology in order to catch up and try to surpass the West when it comes to economic output. I think it's going to be the same with students. The students that are able to use AI and leverage AI to every aspect of the field that they're going to decide to study is going to have a massive competitive advantage to students that don't. And there tends to be a controversy within higher education. To what point? And this controversy is not new. I mean, you could go back to the history of higher education, and if you talk about what is a liberal arts education, as the Romans kind of coined it, the education of a free person, deals with critical thinking skills, right? It deals with reading and writing, and beyond arithmetic, beyond reading and writing, it tends to be about knowing about government and history and critical thinking, because you want the education of a free person to basically participate in the civic life within a republic. And so the controversy was in higher education, as the purpose of higher education originally was to prepare people to be clergy, right? To be members of the church or members of a religious institution. You wanted them to learn Latin and Greek and a lot of the ancient languages. In the case of Yale, they also included Hebrew. And so the controversy kind of changed in the 19th century on, do you move away and teach in the modern languages, right? And so it's this idea that you're being iconoclastic if you move away from Latin and Greek and move into other languages. And then as technology began to develop within the math department, there was this idea of, what about calculators? When it came to the development of disciplines, do you focus disciplines into particular fields? Do you break away from just the general religion and kind of begin to focus on beyond trades, but certain professions, beyond law and the medical field? So there tends to be a lot of controversies within higher education as you modernize, as you basically move away from that traditional outlook. And I think AI is that new frontier in that controversy, as higher education begins to modernize itself and say, how do we incorporate this technology? How do we teach students think critically and at the same time leverage this tool? And so there's a lot of scholars, a lot of academics that are teaching students how to prompt the AI, how to use the AI to basically guide their critical thinking skill. When Stata came out, which tended to be statistics software, a lot of people felt that they're going to replace the job of what professors and students should be doing when it comes to statistics. But still, students need to learn statistics so that they could basically guide the AI on how to use the proper tools, on how are they answering the question that you're coming up with. And the formulation of a question, I think, is the toughest part of critical thinking, right? What is the question that you want answered? And a lot of the times you ask a question, you get it answered, and you realize that it's not the answer to the question you really were seeking. So I think the key when it comes to higher education is using the AI to not only help you with your own critical thinking skill, but also having students develop, how do I ask the right question? What is the problem? How do I identify the right problem? And how do I ask the right questions to go to where I need to go? How do I identify my goal? How do I identify the problem? And I think AI is another tool in helping us do exactly that.
Professor Arnold, related to that, also if you could touch upon the question of creativity and authenticity with the introduction of AI to higher education. And I was also thinking, like, more practically, would you advise students to seek certain majors and disciplines against that backdrop? For example, creative writing, English literature, or financial analysis, because the argument is that these are the jobs that are most likely to be degraded, if not completely displaced, by artificial intelligence. Is this something that students should have in mind as they're sort of charting their professional path?
Yeah, I do think that Professor Tapia said a lot of important things. And we need to leverage this technology in ways that operate to our competitive advantage as individuals. In the classroom, I have come up with assessments that are really old style, in part like assessments for in-class writing, a lot more presentations and things that preclude cheating, right? Because unfortunately, some students will cheat, and they won't use AI to supplement their learning and to aid their learning, but to replace their learning. And so as educators, we're kind of walking a fine line where we want to encourage people to develop their skill set, but also prevent people from avoiding the development of their skill set. I do think that it could be used and can be used very well to increase our creativity in various ways. So we can use AI to brainstorm. We can brainstorm with our co-pilot. We can get outlines for papers. We can we can take what we've written and run it through an AI to see if it can do a summary of it that helps us understand it or catalog the ideas better. It can be very, very helpful learning in this way. As far as fields go, I do think we have to try to consider what fields are going to be most deeply affected by it. And, you know, as we're in a competitive marketplace, try to get our heads around that. I teach an IDH class here. That's an honors college leadership class, and I'm having students in that class do some research to see what the probable effects of AI are in their field so that they can try to figure out in advance the ways that they can learn AI to help them in their field rather than you know, doing things that might end up getting them replaced. So that's at least the educational segment. Well, when it comes to the creative arts, you know, we see, I don't know if you all know Suno. It's a software that generates music, or DALL-E generates images. You can take and give a prompt, basically commission these softwares to develop the kind of song that you want or the kind of image that you want, and it will generate something for you that can be helpful for, you know, purposes of illustration or your own amusement. And that's not particularly creative, but in music, there it can be a very, very useful tool if you're a musician who has a melody and has played a guitar part and played a piano part, but you don't play bass. You can now go to your AI bass, which will put a bass line in there for you. That's the kind of stuff that the Office of Copyright said would be copyrightable, whereas the command that you give to a software like Suno that generates something for you doesn't have enough of your own input in it for it to be copyrightable by you. And right now, the Office of Copyrights in the US says that what is made by a machine is not copyrightable. So I think there are ways that we can leverage it to enhance our creativity, and then there are ways that it could just be kind of amusing.
Thank you. And Professor Kapal, if you want to address the AI higher education intersection, that's fine. But I was also curious what your thoughts are about the moral and ethical implications of AI. You know, some human values like empathy, like, you know, justice, or the common good. I'm personally of the belief that whenever big tech is involved in anything, a little bit of our humanity gets lost. And are we losing them, or is there any way to claw back some of those values, or, you know, to keep them with AI encroaching on, you know, on those values?
I think it's a good question. I mean, I think for you know, I have a little a newborn. He's 5 months old, and we don't let him play on the phone, on a mobile phone at all. So we're just constantly engaging with him, talking to him. He's reading our face. He's reading the faces of the people around him. We take him. Yesterday, we took him to temple, to the Jewish temple on the beach, the museum there, and he saw, you know, amazing things. Taking him to restaurants and stuff like that. I think, honestly, part of clawing back your humanity or finding your humanity is like turning off the technology. It's like literally just like turn off your phone, turn off the computer, and you need to just sit with yourself in silence, or just sit with someone else and talk to them, have a meal with them. I think those are the things that really help you to maintain and to develop the empathy and the love for others. So I think that, you know, while AI is good, I mean, I think that you can also carve out a space where we become better people through that important self-work, because I think becoming a better person is a decision. It's the culmination of all the decisions you're making every day. It's what you see. It's what you hear. It's what you think. It's the small decisions that you make over your entire lifetime that make you a good person and a better person as you become older. And ideally, like at least within the Islamic tradition, is the idea is that every day you make better and better decisions, so that by the time you're an old person, you have wisdom, right? And you become an elder within the community, and then people like listen to you, and you're able to teach the next generation, right? So it's not just technology that teaches us, but it's our people that teach us, right? It's our community that teaches us, and redeveloping those bonds of community, redeveloping and listening to people that are different from us. Those are the ways I think that we develop empathy and compassion and consideration, and we create a better world for ourselves. So I think like also just stepping away from technology as an end or an answer in and of itself. It's not. It's a tool that we can use to make hopefully life better for us in certain ways, but it's not an end in and of itself. I mean, think about even the pandemic, right? So AI was used to be able to map and understand the coronavirus, and we were able to get these amazing vaccines made very quickly. But then at the same time, there were also human decisions that were being made. Okay, you can get the vaccine, you can't get the vaccine. Now, who makes those decisions? How do we understand that? I think those are those ethical, moral things that humans have to be able to think and wrestle with. So yeah.
Professor Tapia, I just have one final question for you because I can't let you leave before asking this question. And I was wondering where you stand on the question of the future of our democracy. As you know, we're in the thick of an election season, and social media platforms are just breeding ground for deep fakes and fake news and all the rest of it. And now these chat bots are just swarming all over the place and just bombarding potential voters and perhaps even widening and deepening an already polarized electorate that we have. So do you think after all said and done, AI is going to be erosive of our democratic values and the democratic systems? And like you say, countries like China, like Russia, see an opportunity there to undermine the faith that we have in our institutions.
Definitely. I agree with you wholeheartedly that the usual suspects, Russia, China, Iran, right, are using AI to basically interfere in our elections. And it's not my opinion. It's the opinion of 17 U.S. intelligence agencies that have basically tracked it, seen it, that they use trolls, they use, let's say, fake news stories that have been created. You have troll farms. You have software such as Cambridge Analytica. And Cambridge Analytica, by the way, everything you post on social media, everything you share, whether it's on TikTok or Facebook or Instagram or any social media site, all of that is information that AI could be used to create a psychometric profile of you. And so therefore they know what type of stimuli could be used in order to get you to respond, to vote or act a particular way. And so voter manipulation is an active thing that are used by intelligence agencies around the world and used by governments to try to influence an election. So they know what type of stories you particularly are going to respond to based on what you've shared on Facebook, what you've liked, what you've shared on Instagram. So they create all of these different types of stories to get you to vote a particular way. How is this any different from what has been tried before? But I want you to understand it's at a whole new level. Never before have they been able to figure out your personality type, what you like, how you respond. It's almost like they know you better than your soulmate knows you. And they know exactly what type of story is going to get you to respond, to share, and to vote a particular way. So there's a big question on, are voters manipulated? And in the past, in the 1990s and 2000s, and I've done political campaigns, and I guess that's why you kind of asked me the question, we know based on who are the super voters, based on demographics, based on how many times they voted in certain elections, what groups they belong to. You could send an individual mailer to that particular person. You could do a robocall. You could basically phone bank them. You could send a particular candidate to knock on their door. And that took a lot of time and money. Today, you could take it to a whole new level, and you could cater and tailor an entire campaign to one individual. That's the power of AI today. And I know we're running short on time, but the question on, is this positive or negative? When Facebook came out, when social media came out, everybody said, this is going to be the end of autocratic societies, right? People are going to mobilize. They're going to basically protest in the streets. And all of these autocratic societies are going to come tumbling all over the place. The opposite has taken place, right? Where you have had a proliferation of democracy since the end of the Cold War, right? 75% of today's countries and states are democratic regimes. But you've had authoritarianism have a comeback within in the last 10 to 15 years. And so Facebook, social media goes in both directions. Just the same way that mobilization of domestic groups for democratization have leveraged it for democracy, you're seeing that autocrats, and China in particular, has used it in the same way. Professor Arnold said this is the biggest invention since fire, right? I think when it comes to political campaigns, AI has the potential of giving you more information than ever before, but for people that become so reliant on AI, it can manipulate you into supporting autocratic regimes. So it poses as a real threat to democracy itself.
Well, thank you so much. We have about 10 minutes for Q&A, so we can perhaps collect a few questions, and then we will address them in one go, hopefully. So are there any questions in the audience? Yes.
Well, good afternoon. Thank you for being here, taking time out of your busy days to have this important conversation. So thank you for being this. And I was sitting in the back, I couldn't leave. As much as I was getting text pulling me away of different students that are waiting or activities I have to go to, I said, this topic is way too good for me to just walk out on. But I wanted to ask a question, and maybe I'm going to direct it to Dr. Arnold for a moment, because I know he's heavily invested in this topic I'm going to mention. So could you share a little bit with all the guests and the students here about what we're kicking off and launching as our 10-year quality enhancement plan, and how AI is influenced in that process?
So the quality enhancement plan is a plan that every college and university has to have every 10 years. We're launching ours with a focus on AI readiness, making people AI ready for the workforce. And this is going to be necessary for all of us to know how to use, almost regardless of what area we work in. Certainly people with college degrees are going to have to know how to use AI. So the basic focus of the QEP, it focuses on one course that we have on how you can learn to program AI, but then there's a general education component, a module that we can build into multiple classes across the curriculum that basically prepare students, at least mentally, with an awareness of how AI is used. Ethical concerns of AI, like those that we're talking about, will be a part of that. And then AI in extracurricular areas is another dimension of this, how we can use it there to leverage productivity and things of that nature.
All right. Thank you. More questions? Yes.
Hi, my name is Leanna. So do you believe that in terms of like how far we go with AI, there should be like an ethical boundary where we just all decide as a society to stop, because there could be some problems going on there?
Okay, perfect. Let's get a few more. Yes.
My question is, it was touched upon during the conversation of a regulating body, like in China, regulating AI, stuff like that. There's currently no regulating body in America for AI. Do you think there should be more of a drive to create a regulating body for AI, and should that be a governmental body? Should that be run by the government, or should that be run by more of a private entity?
And I wanted to ask that it seems that China tends to have a very high implementation of AI at a very fast pace in terms of the medical landscape. By 2030, I believe that over 60% of their population is going to be over the age of 65. And as well as in rural areas in China with education, they don't have that many teachers, so there's also a high implementation of AI there. And do you think that America's skepticism of AI in some regard might be the reason that we tend to fall back when it comes to the race within AI?
When it comes to the ethics, there's the question of personal responsibility. So we can ask ourselves as individuals, well, how am I noticing the effect of the use of AI on me, and monitor what we're doing? Then there are possibilities for best practices in industry, for example. These are voluntary sort of guidelines that companies, for example, sign on to, or some best practices that industries make their own moral codes. And then there's government intervention. When in the United States, we have a tendency in comparison to Europe, for example, to allow the private sphere to do much more of that self-regulation. And when they're not regulating well enough, then we step in with government regulation.
Well, I think Professor Arnold kind of answered the question. Here in the United States, we do delegate a lot to private industry, and they create guidelines until there becomes a threat to the public safety, health and safety. And then at that point, you're beginning to see that at the federal level, they create guidelines to help guide the civil society as a whole. But when it comes to the race to AI, and it is definitely a race, the first country that reaches singularity first, which is sentient AI, is going to have an advantage, right? There's this idea of Moore's law that technology doubles every 1 to 2 years. And so there's an exponential effect that takes place when it comes to technological innovation, development, and so forth. And the idea is that you want your nation to have a competitive advantage. Most of human history, we have been able to adapt to technological change because it's happened gradually over time. It's happened over generational change. But now we're talking about generational change within a decade or within 5 years. And so does change happen so fast that we're not able to adapt? And in doing so, we bring down the entire political institutional framework? Or do we slow it down? What is the role of government of slowing it down? Because you have opposing theories, and I'm going to mention 2 theories. One that I'm going to mention a name. I don't want anybody to jump out and kind of attack me all at once, right? One of them is that of Karl Marx, that's going to say that when technology operates so fast that it overturns the economic system, that the entire system crashes and collapses, the people then change that economic system and they move into what he imagined to be a utopian world. And the other one is that of Joseph Schumpeter, Harvard economist, who coined this term of creative destruction. Capitalism is able to reinvent itself over and over and over itself. And people are able to adapt. The question is, how do we adapt? How do we change? Do we become transhumans, as Professor Arnold basically says? Do we create a world of an abundance? And what is the role of government to do that? Because if government does nothing and allows AI to go unbridled, then it could be that Marx is right and the entire system collapses. If government does intervene, and this is what Marx wasn't able to predict, and I think in many ways John Maynard Keynes and others with this idea of the New Deal and using macroeconomics and using government to kind of leverage the change of technology, is able to regulate AI and allow for humanity to catch up with these changes. So the technological, economic, and social changes don't bring down the political institutions that bring us safety and comfort.
Just give us your final thoughts on this intersection on AI and humanity.
Well, I think with anything, there's always going to be possible risks and rewards for it. You know, if there is sort of the development of a singularity, I mean, it's a major change, and at the same time, you know, the question becomes, to what end and exactly, you know, how is that going to change sort of the world that we live in? There is a possibility that AI and technology can also help us to be able to resolve conflict and create a more peaceful world where, you know, arms and things like that are not necessary in the way that they are, that we have to deal with them now. So I think that, you know, creating the larger aims for some sort of idealized world, I think, is something that's important, is creating a spiritual sort of imagination. And I think that's where you guys are going to come in terms of your own work and research and study. The question is, like, what type of creativity, what type of unique ideas can you come up with and then use technology to be able to realize, rather than sort of doing sort of what serves you. And so I think those are those critical thinking skills, creativity skills. Those are the things that I think you should really be trying to hone in on while you're here at university.
Well, thank you so much for this wonderful discussion, and I hope this will be continued. So just one final word. As I mentioned briefly, the Jaffer Institute is sort of dedicated to exploring different dimensions and implications and downstream consequences of AI. So we'll be looking at this from different angles. On October 24th, which I think is a Wednesday, We have an event at Hialeah campus, mostly focused on AI and democracy and elections. So if you're interested in these types of events, please go to Give Pulse to the Hub and RSVP to this event, or just scan that QR code. I'll get a copy of your email, and I'll make sure to send you an email with flyers and information about our future events. With that, again, thank you so much for your time. This was wonderful, and there is coffee and food outside, so please help yourselves. Thank you again.
Because this is about Changemaker Week, I just want to also say there are activities going on again all week. Please check those out.